Hi everyone, welcome back to the Stitches and Scribbles channel. My name is Erin and I have a book podcast for you today. So this is going to be covering everything that I read in February and also some book acquisitions that I got recently because there are quite a few that I ended up adding to my collection. The first book that I finished in February was Monster in the Moonlight by Annalise Ryan. This is book number 4 in the Monster Hunter Mystery series. All of them take place somewhere in Wisconsin. This one happened to take place in, I'm gonna forget what area it is. This is gonna bother me. But it's based off of the Beast of Bray Road, which is not super far. Elkhorn, Wisconsin. Takes place in Elkhorn, Wisconsin, I think. That would make the most sense. Really well written, just like the rest of the series. I love kind of the slow burn romance that's happening in the background as the book series progresses. But it was also a really good mystery, and I love that it pulled in such a specific Wisconsin cryptid for this one. Highly enjoyed, highly recommend the series if you haven't read it. The first one is called Death in Door County, and they've all been fabulous so far. Really fun, easy mystery reads. The second book that I read in February was Thank God Ahead of Time, The Life and Spirituality of Solanus Casey. This was my adoration book for the month of February. And I know I say this in almost every podcast, but I am Catholic and attend adoration once a week. And I prefer to spend my adoration time reading some sort of a theology text. But I was learning about Solanus Casey with my students at the school that I work at, and I was a little curious about his life, so I wanted to read more about him, and I chose that book to do it. Highly recommend it. It was a really great read and really went into detail about his life and how he progressed. Part of the story of Solanus Casey is that he jumped between a lot of different jobs and a lot of different placements as a priest before finally finding the one that worked for him. My students really liked listening to a podcast about him in class because he did live in Wisconsin for most of his young adult life and his childhood as well. But he ended up in a whole bunch of different states and areas of the country. But we really enjoyed listening to the Saints podcast episodes about him. He is currently not a saint yet. But he is in the process of canonization. So we had a lot of fun learning about him, and then I had fun learning more by reading the book. The next book that I finished in February was The Kindred Spirits Supper Club by Amy E. Reichert. I've been slowly getting through all of her books. This was the last one that I had to finish as of right now. She also is a Wisconsin writer. All of her books take place somewhere in Wisconsin. This one took place in the Wisconsin Dells. And I liked this one compared to her other ones because it did have a little bit of a fantasy element in it. Our main character, Sabrina, can talk to ghosts, which was a very interesting twist, but it still has everything you want from an Amy Reichert book. A very sweet romance, very familiar feeling Wisconsin characters, and of course all the sights of Wisconsin. I have not actually been to the Wisconsin Dells, so that part was a little unfamiliar to me, but it definitely made me want to go. So I really enjoyed this one. Realized I've forgotten to give star ratings. I gave all 3 books so far 5 stars. So all great so far. The next book I finished was an audiobook. I listened to Hamlet by William Shakespeare, and I listened to just the Audible version, which is the Folger Shakespeare Library version. Which is an audio drama version. And I listen to this because every year my school does a field trip to go see a Shakespeare play, and the one they were seeing this year was Hamlet. I was supposed to go on the field trip and then was unable to go at the last minute, but I still wanted to listen to the play since I haven't read Hamlet since I was in high school. I wanted to kind of revisit it and came to the conclusion that Shakespeare is still hard to read as an adult. Even with the audio drama version, I found that I was having a little trouble following the storyline. If it weren't for The Lion King, I probably would have been completely lost. I did end up also starting an audiobook, which at this point I'm now at least 2/3 of the way through it. But there's a novelization of Hamlet called Hamlet, Prince of Denmark. And that is proving to be way more helpful in terms of understanding the storyline. Although I do think they extend or change a few plot points in the novel, but it has definitely helped a lot. So if you're going to read Hamlet, I highly recommend also reading Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, the novel, because it did help increase understanding. Just keep in mind the novel is definitely meant for adults. There are some details in it that would not be great for a kid to read. Not that many children are reading Hamlet, but even if you have a student in high school who's reading Hamlet, just keep in mind that a lot of things that happen off stage in the play happen on the page in the novel. So just keep that in mind. The next book that I finished in February, and actually the last book I finished in February, was Night Magic by Leanne Henyon. This was a nonfiction book, so my nonfiction read for the month, all about creatures that are nocturnal or come out at night or glow in the dark, all sorts of stuff like that. I really enjoyed reading this book. I've been kind of looking for a book similar to Unseen City, which was about all animals and nature things that live in urban areas. This felt very similar to that, and I really enjoyed reading it, learning about all the different animals. My favorite chapters were the ones about fireflies, but this was a really cool book and definitely a great giftable book if you do any sort of a book exchange with people. I think it's pretty universally appealing. So recommend that one as well. And I gave 4 stars to both Hamlet and Night Magic, just to keep that together. Book acquisitions. So the first book that I want to show you, my husband actually gave me for my birthday, and this is House of Roots and Ruin by Aaron A. Craig. I read The House of Salt and Sorrows years ago and loved it. This is the sequel to that book, although I don't know if it's a direct sequel or just takes place in the same universe. I'm not 100% sure if I need to reread the first one in order to read this one. And I'm just realizing that this book is upside down inside the jacket. So that was pretty funny. I flipped it open and all the text was upside down. I'll have to fix that later. But the first one was a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses. This one looks like maybe it's just about one of the other sisters from the first one, but it looks really good. I'm very excited to read it. House of Salt and Sorrows was the perfect, like, spooky, atmospheric kind of Halloween light read. I'm hoping that this one feels the same way, but more of a plant theme, versus House of Salt and Sorrows was definitely like lighthouse by the coast, big dark misty cliffs kind of vibes. This looks a little bit more like a haunted Victorian greenhouse, so excited to read that. The next couple books I got all came from little libraries. So the first one I got that I was so surprised to see in a little library was The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I feel like I never see Brandon Sanderson books in little libraries or at used bookstores, which my theory is that people who read Sanderson tend to want to keep Sanderson. So you don't find used copies very often. I don't think that this will be my forever copy of this book because it's pretty beat up, but who am I to say no to a free copy? I have not read the Stormlight Archive yet. In fact, the Brandon Sanderson books that I have read have been all standalones except for Mistborn. I did read the first book of the Mistborn trilogy, but I need to reread it before reading the others. So this will probably be pretty far down on my to-read list. Currently higher on the list for me for Brandon Sanderson is to read The Isles of the Emberdark and Warbreaker, which are both standalone books. So this will come eventually, just not right now. I still have to read The Sunlit Man too. That's the other Sanderson book that I've got to read. The next one I found from a little library is Dune by Frank Herbert. I'm pretty sure that I have attempted to read this before. but I can't remember if I actually got through it. Either way, I wanted to give it another try now that I've gotten more into kind of hard fantasy books like Brandon Sanderson, even though this is definitely sci-fi. And I would like to give the movie a chance again. I saw the first, there's 2 parts for the new movie, right? I saw the first part of the new movies, but like in pieces. Like I think we were watching it on TV at a relative's house, so it was very interrupted while we were watching it. And I'd like to give it a fair chance again. I believe when I tried to read it in the past 2, I also borrowed it from someone while we were staying at their house. So I was rushing to finish it so that I didn't have to take it with me when we left. And this doesn't really seem like a book you should rush. So I grabbed it because I saw it. I'm not 100% sure if I will actually end up picking it up because I don't actually remember liking it. But I wanted to give it a fair chance. See if now that, because I've gotten more accustomed to reading more adult fantasy, if this is something that I would actually end up enjoying. The next one I got, I know I have read before, but it has been a while. This is Binti by Nnedi Okorafor, and this is the complete trilogy. Binti was published as a series of novellas originally, I believe, and I have kind of been following this author since I was in middle school, actually. Oh no, you won't be able to see it on camera, but I do have some of her books behind me. I actually got to meet the author when I was in 8th grade for a young authors competition that I was a part of. And she does have one middle grade novel, which was the book that was featured for that young authors competition. It's called Zara the Windseeker. Really excellent middle grade sci-fi book. Sci-fi fantasy. That one kind of leans more fantasy. But she does do a lot of really interesting science fiction, although all of her other books are definitely YA and beyond. In fact, one of them is definitely an adult book. So just be careful picking these up because her work is at a variety of different reading levels, like quite drastically with the amount of content that's in it. But what I like about her work is that her science fiction and fantasy settings are very much influenced by African culture, specifically mostly Nigerian culture, or at least that's how Zara was. And Binti, I remember it being like Star Trek, but more fantastical than Star Trek. Not quite as logic driven, a little bit more interesting. For like, not that Star Trek's not interesting, but it's very formulaic. This is not that. But it does take place in a science fiction university in space. So I'm excited to reread this. I think this will be a good one to revisit and to add to my Nnedi Okorafor collection that I have. The last 2 books I picked up this month were both from Half Price Books. The first one is one that I've read already. This is Magic Kingdom for Sale Sold by Terry Brooks. And I also was able to find its, oh, there's my receipt that just fell out there. I was also able to find the sequel, The Black Unicorn. I haven't read The Black Unicorn yet. I have read this one, so I'm excited to read this. But I liked these books because they're what I think of as silly fantasy. It's still high fantasy, but there's a lot of kind of goofy elements to it that make it feel a lot less serious. So in the first book, our main character, whose name I am totally forgetting, Ben Holiday, sees an ad for Magic Kingdom for sale in, I believe it's the newspaper, for $1 million. And he decides to just go for it. His wife has passed away. He doesn't have any kids. He's looking for something to do with his life. So when the opportunity arises, he decides to go for it, even though he knows that it's probably not real, might be silly, but he ends up very much the long-awaited king of Landover. So really interesting premise to set up the story. I really liked the first book. It is very 80s, if not 70s. I think it's an 80s publication. Yep, 1986. So just keep that in mind for some plot points. It does kind of stick to some 80s fantasy stereotypes, but they're well written, they're fun. I generally like Terry Brooks from the books of his that I have read, so I was excited to find those at a used bookstore. With that being said, that's going to be it for this episode. I know it was a short one. I did not do a ton of reading this month just because it's been really busy with work and with life things that are going on, so that's why I decided to show you some of my acquisitions as well. It's also been a while since I've acquired like a stack of books. It was a little sad that I probably acquired more books this month than I read, so hopefully we'll fix that in the coming months, especially over the summer. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked what you saw today. If you did, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below so that you can be notified of all my content right here on YouTube. I talk about books, I talk about crafts. It's generally a good time. And if you want to follow me on other social media sites, that information will be in the description box. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.